Let's get started. I'm really excited to be here tonight. Sarah and I have sort of discussed this with Martin Featherstone's there as well from Redcar, Cleveland. This is where it all started, with discussion with Martin, and then Sarah and David from Carmel just, pulling this presentation together for everyone. We hadn't planned such an incredibly beautiful evening. So really to be here, despite this glorious sunshine, to give you time this evening, absolutely amazing. I'm so grateful, really grateful to Sarah for organising all of this, to Martin for the initial sort of ideas and the impetus here to provide this for local teachers, and then it's kind of snowballed and gone further, and for you for giving your time up, and I know how incredibly I'm a busy school leader as well as my role in the EEF, so I completely appreciate and am hugely grateful to this time you're giving to be here this evening. I am aiming to give, fingers crossed, the best value for your time this hour around reading and around also lots of evidence and around implementation as well. So lots to cover. I must admit, when I started to plan this, I did think we had a bit longer. So forgive me if I start to gallop. I've got a lot to fit into this hour. So start by introducing myself. I'm Caroline Bilton. I'm the Literacy Content Specialist at the Education Endowment Foundation. But that's a brilliant secondment. I love it. It's amazing, an incredible opportunity, but I'm still defined by what I really do, what my real job is. And that's being a teacher and school leader up in the Northeast. I'm up in Northumberland, actually, Southeast Northumberland, not the beautiful sort of sandy beaches part, but the slightly grubbier little corner of where Blythe and Cramlington are. Taught for 30 years, been a school leader for about half of that. So hopefully coming to you with a really credible voice tonight. So there you are on the screen. There's my Twitter handle if you want to get in touch and connect on Twitter. I've got the Evidence into Action podcast little sort of snip of that there, because the next one, there I've got about maths, but the next one Alex and I are just in the middle of producing, and it will be about all things reading. So just want to encourage you to engage as much as possible with everything that we have available from the EF, from podcast to presentation, which you're doing, and then all of our resources online as well. So let's get going. Developing effective readers starts with a little bit of sort of corporate stuff around the voice that's behind that, around where I'm coming from. So yes, I'm hugely sort of experienced in terms of practice, but I also speak with the voice of the EEF. And just to give you a really quick snapshot of what we're about generating evidence, because what we believe is that impact on teaching and decisions around teaching are best when they come from an evidence-informed position. So we generate evidence. You may have been involved in an RCT. I know my school have, around lots and lots of different programs, control group or in the action group, in the group receiving the intervention. So we obviously generated the evidence around Nellie, for example. So if your school's involved in that Nellie sort of catch-up initiative, we generated that initial evidence around that. We synthesize evidence. So we're not just about the evidence we generate with schools, we also synthesize evidence. So we take the evidence that's worldwide and distill it down into key accessible messages for teachers. So the key place you'll see that is in the toolkit. That was my first landing point, my first experience of research, education research, and making decisions for our school, for my school, based on that evidence. So, and actually, I should really sort of flag at this point, we are updating that toolkit. An update will be coming in the next couple of months, so please look out for that synthesis of evidence. It's not about do this in your school, it's about this has worked with hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds of thousands of children and schools. So third part of our work, and the reason I'm here tonight and the reason I have the role I do within the EF, is about giving all of that evidence legs, getting it into your classrooms, into your practice, to mobilize, to bring it to life. So I do lots of presentations like this, do lots of talking to teachers, school leaders, research school, all across the board, because what I want is to mobilize evidence. I want that because it's my work, but I want it most sincerely for every teacher and for every child. I want, that evidence-informed practice to find its way into every school. So that sort of gives a little bit of a sort of sense of why I'm here and the work of the EEF. And I encourage you, I can only whet your appetite tonight. Go and have a look. There's so much more to look at, so much more that we give. And why do we do it? What's our core purpose? It's around this gap. And you'll have heard it talked about, so I'm going to mention it very briefly. You can find lots and lots of other evidence to support this. This was the gap before the pandemic. We're working on sort of presenting where we imagine the gap is post-pandemic, but I know that you know the reality, that you're living it every day in the classroom with the children you're working with. And it's very binary, the way we present this, disadvantaged, non-disadvantaged. I know from my work that's not the way children are. They're on a spectrum, somewhere between, beyond, and in all kinds of sort of places. So, understand there are some caveats to this presentation of the gap. What we know is it's around 18.1 months for our disadvantaged children by the time they come out of secondary school, compared to our non-disadvantaged, and around 22.7 for our persistently. So beyond just that ever 6 statistic, a really significant gap. What I say quickly, you say it quickly, perhaps it doesn't have the impact. That's not the impression I want to give. I've taught in some very, very deprived areas. I want you to know that I know the impact of that. And I've worked and will work tirelessly to make a difference, because it's little lads like this in my class, in classes, your classes, who come to us trusting us. Their families send them to school, trusting us to make a difference to that gap. That gap that I stress again was there before pandemic. Let's think about, the reality you're living post-pandemic for this little lad and so many children that we're with. So that's why we do what we do. And then in terms of putting in context what I'm going to talk to you about tonight, it's within this tiered approach. So the evidence tells us, what do we do about that gap? What practically am I coming to talk to you about tonight? I'm coming to talk to you about your teaching, that high quality teaching, that day-to-day teaching. When the kids come to you in my school, they come to us from 8:30 to 20 to 9 until 3:10. And it's that high quality teaching every day, every minute of those lessons that I'm going to talk to you about, that teaching of reading within your English lessons and beyond that, literacy beyond your English lessons, because that's what the evidence tells us is the most important lever schools have. The most important way, the way you make a difference to that gap, is through that access to high quality teaching. And that's what the tiered approach is about. It gives that 50% focus to that. And then you see, within the pie chart, yes, interventions have a place. Yes, wider strategies have a place. But we are committed to that understanding that it is that minute by minute, that everyday teaching that children receive that is so significant to them. So to support that and to support that mobilization, we produce our guidance reports. Hopefully you know them. Hopefully you know that one of our primary guidance reports has been updated recently. I co-authored that guidance report update and packed it with exemplification, packed it with really practical, accessible strategies that you can use to bring that evidence to life, to make that difference. Because while we're talking about disadvantaged children, what I would stress is that your strategies, your teaching for your disadvantaged children benefits those children and benefits every child. It cannot, it should not be distinguished from the strategy that is there for every child in your school. It's woven together in good practice. So these recommendations are woven together in good practice for every child, but are particularly significant for our disadvantaged children. So our guidance reports bring this to life, and this one I hope particularly is really, really embedded in practice. You'll find it really useful. I'm going to whet your appetite with a few references to it tonight, but I would love for you to go back, download it, look at it with colleagues, share it, make it useful, make it supportive of that high quality teaching that we know will be most supportive of our children. Okay, so that's the point I'm coming to you at. And I'm going to start that talk around literacy, around building our children's reading at the point at which, the very beginning of it. Okay, so that complex task of reading starts with talk. And this, I think, just puts it in really, really simple terms. It's one we say over and over again in my school. It's the sea upon which everything floats. So we talk to parents about it, we talk to children about it, we talk to one another about it, giving those opportunities for children to understand language. Spoken language is that sea on which we can develop. We need as much opportunity for that packed in as possible before the children start school. In the earliest years, it's time sensitive, so up to the age of 6, we so want the children to have as many opportunities to build their language, to interact with adults. But beyond that, it's the poor relation as children get older in terms of reading and writing, but it's absolutely vital as we develop the children's reading and writing. Keeping and maintaining a focus to speech and language is vital. And our guidance stresses that. It's recommendation 1 of the Key Stage 1 and the Preparing for Literacy and the Key Stage 2 guidance reports. It goes on to be hugely significant in the secondary guidance reports as well. It's that golden thread. It's the foundation, I stress this, of literacy. It begins with prioritizing it. It's, yeah, I stress again, the foundations. It's something we shouldn't be shy of. It's something we shouldn't think, oh, that just, I'm not getting anything written down. It's to be stressed that accountable talk, those dialogic classrooms in which children learn to talk. So we develop their vocabulary, and then learn through talk. So we develop their ability to interact, we support that, are vital to focus. And, I'll try and weave in some of the moment experiences. How significant is this for your children in the current circumstances? How vital is this, given how little they may have interacted with adults? How many hundreds of hours of speech and language may your children have missed, and what priority does that then manifest itself as in your work in schools? And that comes to those high quality interactions. We make it look easy as teachers as we tune in and we pull and we draw out and we to and we fro between the child. And it, in many respects it is easy, but fine-tuning it to build that architecture in a child's brain through that interaction is vital. It's that starting point, that readiness to read, that maintains a focus for us. If we're really, really keen, we understand the importance of all aspects of reading, quality interactions are a vital and significant opportunity. And we do that explicitly and implicitly. We make explicit the opportunities by teaching children vocabulary. I was in the reception class this morning, absolutely gorgeous, outside with the water trays, building their vocabulary through explicit teaching in the water tray. They're modeled and extended by the teacher working with me. And she said, Caroline, we haven't done any writing this week, but she's building that language through those explicit opportunities and implicit. It's happening all around in other places. It's happening in an incidental way. And each of those opportunities, those explicit, I've planned for it, I've organized it, I've orchestrated it, it happens, or it happens, wow, this is happening because I've set up a small world area. This is happening because we're discussing, it leads out of something. It's an implicit, it unfolds with opportunity, are vital to take a chance to just pull out, seize the moment with each of those. Collaborative activities as well, vital. And we might not get as much chance to dig into this as we can in terms of this presentation. I encourage you to go and look at the exemplification within the guidance reports. For so many years, I thought I was the teacher that was, I did collaborative learning because I said, share ideas with your sharing ideas partner. The nuance, the detail within that, and how we scaffold, we model that discussion between peers, adult to peer, is vital to set up in terms of accountable talk, problem solving, building that open-ended questioning. Dig in and find more in terms of that exemplification. I'll give you one though. This is one of the resources. Actually, we've just shared this one today, but it's in the Key Stage 1 update. I just hope in this to give any sort of sense of tweaks or nudges to your practice, something that you can just perhaps think a little bit more about in terms of, we want that interaction to come backwards and forwards, not just, oh, what's that, Josh? It's but tell me about that, and then building it up. These prompts and thoughtful sort of starters are about building that to and fro interaction, building that language, because as I say, it is that vital starting point for all of literacy, for our reading, for our writing. It's within the guidance report, and actually we've just published that as a separate document. Really useful one, I would hope, to print out, to build up to A3 on the photocopier, and then interact with, discuss, share with colleagues. It's not something we would say, but we would say it this way, or in our topic, we could be really building the children's speech and language through this prompt or that prompt. Hopefully it can come to life only as a starting point in your context to support that focus. So yeah, when we talk about talking with children, the children's suggestions are at the heart of that, building from their points of interest, asking those tuned in authentic questions, showing that you're really genuinely interested by devoting time to discuss points that they have suggested. I talked to a colleague yesterday for the podcast I mentioned, and she said that they'd been reading a piece about Galileo in year 5, and they'd been discussing it and arguing different points around what he had suggested in terms of the topic they were studying. So if we look at those points and we use them only as starting points to really very deliberately build that language for children. This comes from that sustained shared thinking research, the evidence that really does support the to and fro interaction between adults and children. So I really do want to start with that point because it is so significant. There on the on the left of your, sorry, I think it'll be on the left of your screen, is the sustained shared thinking model. That's the one that we've used to support those prompts. And then, given we've talked about the hundreds of hours, potentially, not for all children, and we know lots of children may have been incredibly sort of fortunate and living in rich literacy environments with lots of conversation and interaction. That's not true. That's not true of the community I teach in. It may be, but so for many children, it's been missing. So we've developed further resources to support families, like that trust framework, taken from the sustained shared thinking model, distilled down into really simple, accessible ideas to share with your families. That's still available on the website. Was actually something I wrote to support schools when children, when we were limited openings, but I think it still stands. We've got a lot of time, a lot of recovering to find back. So supporting our families to build those opportunities for high quality interactions remains really, really important, I'm sure, for your schools as for mine. Okay, so I'm racing on because I'm sort of mindful that you'll be, come on, get to reading, Caroline. So there we go, the foundations. And I want to stress that sea on which everything floats. I think that concept brings it to life for children, for families, for us as the teaching profession. Because the teaching of reading is complex, and that's one I can't take away from us. It's a complex task, but we're looking to support our children to become accurate decoders with fluency and with comprehension. That's the purpose of, when you ask me, so what do you mean by an effective reader? What are you going to be getting at tonight? They're the sort of components of that complex task that I'm going to try and break into in our time this evening, when children are reading independently, but also when we read aloud to children, how we support them to be strategic, to use reading comprehension strategies, to read with interest, to read with enthusiasm. So that's where I'm coming to, this effective reader. I'm looking at decoding, I'm looking at comprehension, and I'm looking at fluency whilst activating background knowledge. Okay, it's complex, but as I said right at the beginning, I'm looking to navigate routes through it. And that navigation started with the foundational importance of language. I will come back to that because I can't stress it enough. The evidence to support it is really, really powerful. It's very, very clear. Locked up in padlocks, as we call it at the EF, meaning that it's secure evidence. And you can see that in this infographic. I'm sure you'll know it. I'm sure you'll know it. It was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, this one, back when the EF sort of presented their very first guidance report. This one, to me, was it. Right, so when nobody actually taught me at college how to teach kids to read, because I didn't, it was a long time ago, but nobody actually did, was kind of almost expected. It was in the day where was real books. So by osmosis, the kids would pick up real books and learn to read. Well, no, it's complex. And that's what the reading rope shows us. There are so many aspects to it that as teachers, we have a responsibility to understand and to therefore teach. So absolutely vital we understand the complexity of it. So to break it down just a little, in terms of the rope, we have the top bundle there, the language comprehension, which I've talked to you about. So children need all of that work around vocabulary, around literacy structure, around language. All of those different aspects of the rope need to be in place for the child to become a skilled reader, alongside that word recognition. So as children come to us from their earliest moments if we are not focusing on each one of those threads, the bundle there that focuses on language comprehension and the bundle that focuses on decoding, we're not developing the children as skilled readers. So I speak to lots and lots of schools and teachers who perhaps are under a misconception around this. There's almost a sense that we do a kind of relay. So we teach the children to decode. We work with decodable readers and we decode and we teach the children, obviously building from phonological awareness, phoneme awareness, phonological awareness. We build that decoding capacity. So when that's in place, then we go to comprehension. Big, big, big misconception, and not the way to quickly and effectively get our children to become skilled readers. Every one of those threads, you see them there, the verbal reasoning, the literacy knowledge, all of those threads in the upper bundle, vocabulary, constantly think about my reception class, building vocabulary. That is equally important, that work in the water tray to that work in the phonics session. They are all of those skills building to help our children to become skilled readers, to become effective readers, to become strategic readers. Okay, so really to stress that point. And in the guidance report, you will see it stressed as a balanced approach. We need both. The national curriculum tells us our statutory requirement is to teach both alongside. So when we're reading to children, I'm very often asked, so if a child can't read, how do they get the opportunity to comprehend, to build all of this? Well, this is about reading aloud to children. I'll talk to you again about this through the presentation. I'll come back to this point. My absolute reason to be is to read aloud to kids. I'm surrounded by children's books here. Reading aloud to children felt for a long time a bit like a guilty pleasure. But the better I understand the evidence, the more I know my instincts were right. When I read aloud to children, I'm developing vocabulary. I'm developing verbal reasoning because we discuss characters. I'm developing all of that background knowledge because those rich opportunities to understand texts are absolutely embedded in the text I choose to read with children. So to stress, I can read aloud to develop that language comprehension alongside my phonics sessions, my sessions which develop and are vital. Don't for a second think, because I do consider comprehension to be the poor relation, I don't underestimate the significance, the importance of systematic teaching of phonics. And there it is, it shows, weaves together and gets to our effective readers. We can look at it sort of in another way. So we've got Scarborough's reading rope, an incredibly important sort of representation. This is really, really useful, the simple view of reading. Ironically, it's not meant to be simple. It's kind of, the presentation is intended to be simple. Within it are much, much more complex sort of understanding of it. So children need that word reading. And you can see there in the top right-hand corner, with that comprehension, with that skilled, fluent word reading, we have our good readers, our effective readers. There they are. They need both elements of that. And the SVR shows us when we're plotting, and if you're doing any diagnostic assessment at the moment, if you're listening to children read, thinking about interventions, thinking about impact, and this for me is the more important, or as important, sorry, as thinking about interventions, how will this impact my practice with all of the children, what I'm finding along this SVR, then use this as a tool. It is very much an assessment tool and to help you. If your children are struggling with comprehension, giving them more phonics isn't going to support them with that. If your children are struggling with comprehension, teaching them explicitly comprehension strategies, and from a very young age, teaching them that alongside high quality text that you read aloud, there is a solution. If you've got children who are very strong in their comprehension but struggling with word reading, your phonics interventions. So a support really here in the SVR for understanding those two aspects. I'll bring you back to that. I'll bring you back to that foundation. You saw that within the rope, within my starting point for language, and that builds to our decoding too, that phonemic awareness. If you're interested to dig a little bit more, I did read somebody hoping to get a bit more on phonics and phonemic awareness this evening. I haven't really got enough time to cover that, but I would direct you to our guidance report. Go in there, it is exemplified. All of the different recommendations are. I'm going to talk a little bit more though about the kind of poor relation of that, because very often when I go into schools, when I speak to school leaders, phonics is the one they feel most confident with. Teaching the children those decoding strategies is the one that very often teachers have received most training around. We've invested as a country probably millions in supporting teachers to teach phonics. For many teachers, it's the only instruction they've had. And yet I've shown you, haven't I, that it's not enough on its own. It's absolutely vital, but children need something more. And if we go back to our disadvantaged children, those who come perhaps from less rich literacy environments, very often those children who haven't had that vocabulary developed, who are on the other side of the word gap, they're perhaps more affluent peers, have many, many, many more words in their vocabulary, have much, much richer sort of diverse literacy content to draw on. They are the children for whom the explicit teaching of reading comprehension is not something to leave to chance. Because if we don't give every child a chance to reflect, to eat, to digest the books we give them, to feel them, I get very, it's vital. For so many kids, it's a how many words can I read and keep the teacher happy. If we don't build the opportunity to reflect, and we don't teach our teachers how to build those opportunities, how to navigate this complex act of comprehension, we're struggling for many of our children, particularly those from our disadvantaged background. So I'm going to talk to you, given that context of, we're in a situation for many schools, and it may not be true of your context, but for many schools, the opportunity to be trained around reading has centered around phonics. The opportunity to be trained around reading comprehension is a less sort of well-trodden path in terms of CPD. So let me just give you some thoughts to start that thinking, to encourage you to think around reading comprehension. It is very, very well evidenced. And as I said at the beginning, my job is to come to you from that evidence perspective. Makes my heart sing, actually, because it's definitely something that I've seen in my classroom. The evidence certainly reflects at that point, that at the intersection between practice and evidence. It's worked for me. Definitely those explicit teaching of reading comprehension, on average 6 months progress for children. And I say again, leaving it to chance for perhaps our most disadvantaged children puts that 6 months progress in jeopardy. It's very, very much something we can explicitly teach and make a difference with in our teaching. So how do we teach it? Okay, how is that enacted in the classroom? Because my pathway to this is a very, very complicated one. I trained back 30 years ago, longer than that, if I'm honest, where it was just expected by osmosis that you would know how to teach. Well, you're a primary school teacher, of course you know how to teach kids to read. Of course you know how kids should read between the lines. That was a really key phrase, read between the lines. Inference. These were phrases I didn't understand. I couldn't, I just didn't get them. I would nod, like, you know, I was in the audience and in the crowd there for the emperor with his new clothes on. Yeah, I know how to do that. But I didn't fully understand how it is we make this happen, enacted in the classroom, until I dug more deeply into the evidence. And what I've done here is present this for you, this infographic, in terms of how do we teach that? And we have those strategies there. This is how it works in my classroom. The 5 strategies for reading comprehension. I teach them explicitly to the kids in my class. So lots of my kids come and their hands are up and they're immediately making predictions and they're immediately questioning, because they come with the instruction manual about how to understand, how to comprehend a text. It's wired to them because they've read from the get-go. But lots of my kids don't, and I've got to give them the manual. So the manual looks like this. It starts with questioning. Strategic, effective readers create questions in their head about a text. They are constantly questioning. So there's my first strategy. Not necessarily in order. This is very dependent on your children. But let's just take them in order of the infographic there. Questioning is a really important one that not every child does. You'll think of the kids who ask questions and those who don't. Well, model and scaffold. And there's some prompts to get you started. Model and scaffold, asking questions about a text. Activate prior knowledge. In my class, I explicitly model and scaffold how we make links. We make links within the text, we make links to other texts, and we make links to the real world. So we constantly define ourselves as link makers. I saturate the children in this. They do it across every subject. Making links is something they know is going to make me very happy. I love a link maker is my catchphrase in the classroom. Okay. My next one is summarizing. Actually, I'm going to come back to that one because that's the trickiest one, if I'm honest. Clarifying. Let's look at that one next. I think of the kids in my class who come to me with the finger and I don't understand this, I don't know this. And that sense of a right to clarification, looking for anything you don't understand and getting that right to understand is a vital part of being an effective reader, of being a strategic reader. You should make sure your children feel that right, give them that right, model it and scaffold it all of the time. If you don't understand it, annotate the text, annotate the text, annotate, and look for that clarification. Make predictions. And you know, here's a great one. We get the cover of a book and we make predictions about the book. But beyond that, once we're into the book, we should then monitor those predictions and make more, not just from the front cover. I made that mistake. It's just that, you know, get the front. What's this story going to be about? Well, then once we're into it, making those predictions is crucial. It's vital. It's part of what is an effective reader. Okay. The prompts you can see around the edge are to support your practice with this. I'm going to finish with summarizing. It is tricky, but if a child doesn't take a summary away from what you've read to them, it's lost to them. And if they struggle to do that, you have to teach them strategies to do that. I say to kids, this story needs to grow legs and it needs to go home to you. Let's put some key points down on a post-it. Let's make some subheadings or underline some subheadings that will capture the key points. We've got to make a summary. It's vital in a short story, in a picture book. It's vital in a longer book with chapters. Even at the most simple level, if children don't carry a summary of a text, it's lost. We've got to encourage that. Build that library. Sorry, take a deep breath. I get a bit carried away with this one. Build that library in their head, that knowledge of literature. It must build and grow, and referring back to it, making links to it. So I explicitly model and teach these so the children know the strategies, until I'm able to let them go and they know when and how to use them. Okay. I haven't really got as much time as I'd like to dig into this, to timing, to the specifics, but knowing that they need to be modeled and scaffolded across texts with any text, not just with special text, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, not just with, oh, you can only do it with the texts that have got the published set of questions with them. No, they are with any text, with a short text, with a long text, with anything you get your hands on. Saturate the children in those 5 strategies. We want, let's say we've got that decoding running along, we understand systematic phonics, we've got to keep that other bundle moving along. We've got to work on that comprehension. And just for you to consider, you go and Google reading comprehension, or you look at the toolkit, reading comprehension. It's powerful. Don't know how to teach it. Just to consider some red flags in what you might come up with. Some red flags in terms of written tasks. Twinkle gives you a written comprehension, like what I did in school back in the day. You've got a card, read it and wrote the answers in a sentence. That's not what we're talking about. That's not reading comprehension. That's not the strategies that give that impact that I've shown you. Literacy Shed have their vipers, and lots of that does overlap with this, but it limits, it gives you a set of key texts. It's very much about, you ask these questions. What I want to see is this embedded in pedagogy. So I pick up and I can support the children. I can prompt and model and scaffold with any text. It's not based on the content domains. It's not based on assessment. It's not based on writing things in a book. It's about discussion. It's about my whole class teaching. It's about group teaching. It's about one-to-one teaching of reading. So really thinking about where we're building those strategies, how they're prompted, modeled, scaffolded. Again, I would love you to use this, print it out, blow it up, annotate it with different tests, with different ideas in your voice. That's my voice. Use your voice. It's really important. And see where the red flags are and what you might be able to get a hold of in terms of reading comprehension, should you go looking. And, to add to this, the importance of alongside, so we're thinking about decoding, we're thinking about reading comprehension, we're thinking that we need the children's working memory to be increasingly freed up from the energy, the efforts to decode, to comprehend in the way I've talked. So we need fluency. We need reading fluency. And it could like read a bit faster. that feels like it should be the solution to it. Just read that a bit faster. Again, we've got to teach it. We need to model it. We need to scaffold it. We need to build it. So Tim Rosinski is the absolute guru of this. I've had the incredible privilege of listening to him talk. He's a professor in America. He talks so eloquently about this tiny building blocks that we can have in our practice, those tiny tweaks and nudges that can influence the children's reading fluency. So my guilty pleasure, reading to kids, wasn't something I should have been embarrassed about, because that was about modeling prosody, about modeling the phrasing, where I slow, where I speed, where I wouldn't dream with an idiom of breaking the words down. So raining, cats and dogs, I wouldn't break it. It has to flow. It has to, that prosody, that knowledge of phrasing is vital. So all of that I'm doing when I'm reading aloud shouldn't have been embarrassed about. That wasn't time wasted. That was time built in to fluency and comprehension. It's about automaticity. But automaticity leads to speed. Speed does not lead to, so we can't tell kids, just read a bit faster. I want to be clear about that. There are some things we do, not telling kids just to read faster. We want them to have that automaticity in place and that prosody, but it comes with practice. Let's think. It comes with me reading aloud to the kids, with you reading aloud. They need to hear fluent reading modeled. It's vital. It's a vital part of it. It's, yeah, in every respect. Maybe they'll have a copy of the text with them. Great. Absolutely brilliant if they have. Perhaps you'll be reading it from the board. Brilliant to do that as well. Encourage that across the curriculum, not just in your English lessons. I love singing with my kids. I love sing up. So I've got the words to sing up on the board. That's an absolute perfect opportunity to develop prosody, the phrasing of the words in the song. I love poetry. We say poems for fun, like spaghetti, spaghetti, your wonderful stuff. Again, that's an opportunity to build prosody, because we're looking together about where we slow, how we phrase. Squeezing every opportunity for that is really important. So that guided oral reading instruction as well. Read a text, read it back to me. Actually, at this point here, give feedback that absolutely supports it. Give the child and practice. Take that paragraph. We're going to practice it. We're going to read and reread. I want to give you a little bit of support about where we need to change, where we need to improve. And we're going to get it to that point of a fluent read piece. Repeated reading. So we'll keep going with that. We'll do that as a whole class. I do that. Choral reading, repeated reading, rereading. Let's read the point at which. I love reading, so I usually teach year 6. I love reading scary stories. Let's read the point at which we were really, really on the edge of our seats. Repeated reading is all part of those building blocks. Sorry, I'll go back. I'm trying because I'm very aware of time. Those building blocks that develop that fluency. So if we go back, just bear with me a sec. I'm going to go back to the rope because I want us to think about what we've looked at. We've thought about phonics. We know that. We've got that in place. Go and dig further with that one. But I'm pretty sure you'll have clear systems for teaching phonics in school. But now we know very, very clearly about the importance of language and comprehension. And the bridge between those two aspects, those two bundles, that being fluency. So once I've got the automaticity in my decoding, I've got it there, lead to speed. Once I've got that, and I'm not focused on that, then I can build all of those opportunities there for comprehension. And that's what we're aiming for. It needs modeling, it needs scaffolding, as everything we teach in reading does. It needs to be there for our children. And I want to finish. Perhaps I'll grab a quick drink of water. I want to finish with some thoughts about perhaps where you're at in school. We're being hit with lots of statistics around reading. We're being hit with lots, for example, we have published around these NFER results. You'll be doing diagnostic assessments in school. These NFER tests were taken, compared children after lockdown 1 with children, I think in 2017 or 18. And we looked at the gaps and the differences, and we found reading comprehension to be a significant area of concern. These diagnostic tests found that to be a significant area of concern. And I suppose what that means, let's just break it down a little bit more. There was a 2 months gap for children, all children, in terms of their reading, between 2017 and 2020 after lockdown 1. Give a quick maths one there as well, so it was there for maths as well. But in terms of our disadvantaged children for reading, that was 7 months. And those infants, that reading comprehension, were a recurring issue that we found when we looked at the diagnostics within those tests. Okay, I sort of come to this point because I think it's really important in terms of tonight, what we've talked about, and in terms of potential solutions to those results coming your way as school leaders, as teachers. being hit with lots and lots of catch up, and children are at a disadvantage. This deficit language of we've got to do something quickly really, really worries me for everyone's well-being, for teachers' well-being, for children's well-being, but also for the challenges that will create. This tidal wave of shiny solutions, if we talk about those results there, 7 months and 2 months. So what do we do? How do we move that ahead quickly? I want to really encourage that evidence-informed decision-making at this point, to pause and to think, to take you back to the tiered approach, to take you back to 50% of that pie chart. And for many children, bigger than that. And for me, it flexes, and we've got a model coming that flexes and moves that and does make it bigger in terms of your decision making, where you focus and how you focus your energy to meet those anxieties around those results, being based in that tiered approach, being that effort around whole class teaching, around that teacher being the most important lever we have to deal with that issue around those results, the 7 months, the 2 months, the attainment gap I showed you right back at the beginning, and the realities in your school, which I know will be complex and nuanced within all of this. Think about that tiered approach. And most importantly, think about implementation, thinking about what it is that's right in your school. So I have rattled through at a breakneck speed so many different aspects of reading there, given and speech and language. I've covered pretty much 4 recommendations in the sort of 55 minutes that I've been talking to you. So much that I've covered. But I want to be really clear that gives you lots to think about. It should not. I want to stress, it should not be something you then go to school and say, right, this is it. This is what we're going to do differently from tomorrow. The implementation process is really clear. That new shiny things, perhaps interventions, perhaps something I've talked to you about tonight, all of those things will fail. They'll not land. Evidence, my experience, they're best bets about what's worked. They are not necessarily the right thing for your context, for your schools. I know the unique nature of schools. I know that very, very well, having worked in quite a few. Your context, explore. That's where this process starts. So if I've said something tonight, or you've seen an intervention, or you've seen something that thinks this could be for me the right thing, this could be, I'm thinking about those gaps, I want to address them really quickly, or my assessment has identified this gap or that gap, I want the solution in place really quickly, I would urge you to slow down, to explore, to look and see what's happening in school, to think about where it is your children, your staff are in terms of speech and language, are in terms of your phonics provision. I've glossed over it a bit tonight. Do you need to go back and have a look in the guidance reports and dig a bit more into that? If decoding is your issue, is it around comprehension? If it is, where does that start? Exploring your context and understanding it is absolutely vital. That's the one thing. I don't want to become part of the problem. I know how it is to be in school and, down the road that they're doing this approach or that approach, and this is going to work for us. It's a much slower process. We talk about pause at the EF. Think about precisely where you're at. Find accurate solutions, understand them. Stop doing some things. You've got to do fewer things better. You've really got to do that sense of slowing. What do I really want to deal with? What do I have to stop in order to make this happen? So yeah, I think I've perhaps come to an end. I've got an email address there. I've got a Twitter handle there. I would absolutely love to stay in touch. Would encourage you to go and look further. This has been a breakneck sort of rush through. I can only apologize for that. I kind of wanted to give you value for your time, whet your appetite only as a starting point. So please, if you've got any questions, because of the sort of size of the audience, it's difficult to answer anything specific. I'm sorry, but if you do have questions, be in touch. If you want to connect on Twitter, you want to see resources that are coming out, connect and find there. But yeah, know that when you are building all of those foundations around literacy, around speech and language, around reading, that is just absolutely vital work. Yes, and end with some thanks. Some thanks to Martin, again, for initiating this from Redcar and Cleveland. Absolutely brilliant to have been to have had the opportunity to speak to so many teachers. An absolute privilege. I couldn't be more grateful, giving up the sunshine and your precious time. A thanks to Sarah McGee at Carmel Research School for organising this. Yeah, and we'll somehow make the presentation available. And know that you go just onto our website and you can find anything there at all that I've talked about, really.